Today from the global lane, the Ayatollah warns the U.S. will pay a heavy price if it strikes again. But did the bunker buster bombs only bring setback or obliterate Iran's nuclear facilities?
It's hard to see them coming out in any way intact. I think if Iran were foolhardy enough to build another enrichment facility, A, we would see it, and B, we could destroy it. And there's nothing they could do about it.
Was Trump's preventive action against Iran legal? Constitutional law expert Alan Dershowitz weighs in.
Presidents can make war if it's in the national interest, if it's necessary to defend the country.
Judicial crisis. District judges handing down nationwide injunctions. 2 to 3 lawsuits filed daily against the president's executive orders.
We're using the law for political purposes. We're seeing it from all sides. But I think Trump has been the victim of it more than any other president in history.
And facing population extinction, the British Parliament chooses death over life. And it's all right here on the global lane. Iran's nuclear program, minor setback or obliterated? A late preliminary Pentagon report suggests the damage by U.S. airstrikes was not as extensive as President Trump claims. However, the International Atomic Energy Agency reports very significant damage and fears radiological leaks. Well, joining us with more is former Deputy National Security Advisor, Vice President of the Heritage Foundation, Victoria Coates. Victoria, we're receiving mixed messages here. So in your opinion, how extensive were the U.S. and Israeli airstrikes against the Iranian nuclear sites? And were they a temporary setback, a devastation that will take years to rebuild? What do you think?
Well, I'm more in the obliteration camp. I think that knowing what I know about the planning for this operation, which has been going on for more than a decade, and the ordnance that was dropped on these 3 sites, it's hard to see them coming out in any way intact. And it's important to realize that what was leaked, and it was leaked via a couple of reporters who were responsible for hits like the Hunter Biden laptop, the Steele dossier. These are the outlets that had received, and the individual reporters that had received those false pieces of information in the past. So this is clearly a playbook that's being followed here to leak an early assessment, that makes that judgment with, in intel speak, low confidence, which means they don't know. And so I think you have outlets like CNN, the New York Times, in a race to be wrong, because they'd rather be wrong and discredit the president than wait and report accurately that this was a successful strike.
Yeah, they don't want to give him any credit, or the pilots who actually did the mission. A recent report suggests that 900 pounds of Iranian uranium is missing, may have been moved or hidden elsewhere. Additionally, unverified reports are indicating that other countries might be assisting Iran in acquiring nuclear warheads or in rebuilding their program. And an Iranian government official has also stated that they're already constructing a new enrichment facility. So is this Iranian propaganda? What are your thoughts on these developments?
Well, it's certainly something to watch, but I think if Iran were foolhardy enough to build another enrichment facility, A, we would see it, and B, we could destroy it. And there's nothing they could do about it. They are utterly exposed at this point. They have no air defenses. They have no air force to speak of. And so, if they've spent $2 trillion over the last 20 years on their nuclear program, if they're going to spend another $2 trillion over the next 20 years to reconstitute it, I'm okay with that timeline, but I also think we can set it back whenever the president would choose to do so.
In your opinion, what's the likelihood of regime change? We're not seeing anti-Ayatollah activists and protesters in the streets of Tehran right now.
Well, if it does happen, it's going to happen outside Tehran. You'll start to see it in more provincial towns, and it'll be interesting to watch. The president has been clear that the mission of the United States in this case is not regime change. It was to obliterate the Iranian nuclear program, and that's what he stayed very focused on. And in an effort not to get involved in another prolonged, open-ended conflict like the ones we've seen previously in the Middle East, he wants to wind this up now. This is it. We did what we said we were going to do. Now we're going to move on. Now, that said, the Iranians have been severely weakened and degraded, and the regime still has its kind of oppressive control apparatus that it imported from China to maintain its power over the Iranian people. But their perception, the Iranian people's perception of their leadership, has significantly changed. And it may take some time for that to manifest itself as they wrap their heads around what's happened over the last 2 weeks. But I think that is very possible going forward. It's just not the stated purpose of the United States.
So give it some time, in other words. So what is the risk then of an Iranian reprisal against the U.S., whether through sleeper cell agents or a cyber attack targeting the electrical grid or water supply here?
Again, something to watch very closely. We know that some 1,500 Iranian nationals were part of the apprehended and then released into the United States during the Biden administration, part of that group. So they're here. Some of them got rounded up yesterday and the day before. Most concerningly, an Iranian army sniper down in Alabama, which might seem like a curious place, but bear in mind, around Huntsville, Alabama, are some of our most sensitive nuclear industrial sites. So that's a bad place for somebody like that to be, and something we have to watch. And then the threat of cyber attacks is also something that the Iranians have significant capability in. And I'm hopeful this is a major topic of conversation at the NATO summit this week, because we do have collective cyber defense capabilities with NATO. They're centered in Estonia, of all places, because Estonia was the location of one of the first major cyber attacks from Russia in 2007. So hopefully they're talking about that. They have vulnerabilities to the Iranians too. And so this is a place where we can actually use NATO capabilities to defend the United States as well as Europe.
Okay, Victoria Coates, a pleasure talking to you. Thank you for sharing your insights. We appreciate it.
Of course, thank you.
As expected, America's adversaries, Russia, China, Cuba, and others are calling the U.S. bombing of Iranian nuclear facilities a blatant violation of law and international charter of the UN. On the home front, some members of Congress argue the president's military operation against Iran was grossly unconstitutional. So what's the truth here about Trump's preventative action? Joining us is constitutional law expert, Professor Emeritus at Harvard Law School, Alan Dershowitz. His latest book is The Preventative State, the challenge of preventing serious harms while preserving essential liberties. Okay, Professor Dershowitz, Chapter 5 of your book concerns preventative military actions. Was this one legal? Some countries and members of Congress say it was not.
Well, the same members of Congress didn't say anything when military action was engaged in by Democratic presidents, particularly Barack Obama engaged in massive military action. Obviously, President Clinton engaged in massive military action. We've had Democrats doing it from the beginning of our republic with Thomas Jefferson. And so it's just hypocrisy. These radical politicians, whether it be AOC or Schumer, just are a bunch of hypocrites. They only oppose it when it's a Republican. Everything is now partisan. There is almost nobody in the United States Senate or the House of Representatives that puts our country first and puts the law first. They first ask the question, is it good or bad for the Democrats? Is it good or bad for my reelection? And so don't listen to them. Listen to constitutional experts. Listen to people who will tell you that when the Constitution was written, the original draft said that Congress has the sole authority to make war. And that was changed by James Madison, saying, no, that was too restrictive of the president's power. Congress has the power to declare law. But presidents can make war if it's in the national interest, if it's necessary to defend the country. And that's been our history since the beginning of the 19th century. So it's just a bunch of hypocrisy. If you don't like the president, then his actions are unconstitutional. If you do like him, then his actions are constitutional. Just ignore all that chatter. It's just total nonsense.
In your book, you talk extensively about false and true positives. And one example concerns the decision by Great Britain not to attack Germany in the mid-1930s. And you suggest had they attacked, innocent Germans would have been killed, but World War II may have been prevented. So what about now? How do you view Trump's action against Iran?
Well, it's even better because as far as we know, no innocent civilians were killed. I have heard of no reports of innocent civilians being killed in these three bombings. And it was a clean military operation very targeted, very specific, and very effective. Now, it may or may not have completely destroyed the Iranian nuclear capacity, but it certainly set it back a considerable period of time. That's good for the world. It's good for the United States. It's good for Israel. It's good for the Gulf states. So I think it's a win-win-win all around. And the Democrats have to stop this. First of all, as a lifelong Democrat, I'm no longer a Democrat, but I was since 1960, the Democrats are shooting themselves in the foot. They're picking every issue that the Americans are opposed to. The vast majority of Americans are completely supportive of the president's actions. And then you have Chuck Schumer and AOC and others, railing against it. That's going to lose them votes, and rightfully so.
And the U.S. is already undertaking preventative measures to protect military personnel in the Middle East and citizens here at home. What is the difference between prevention and preemption? And what is your advice to the president moving forward? Because this could easily move into areas where liberties and laws are broken in the name of national security and geopolitical interests.
Oh, there's no doubt about that. And when you give the government power, often they exceed that power. Preemption and prevention are very interesting concepts, and they're very interesting in the context of this case. For Israel, it was preemption, and for America, it was prevention. There was no immediate threat that Iran would use nuclear weapons against the United States. That threat was more long-term. But there was an immediate threat that possibly it could be used against Israel. So Israel had the right to take action preemptively and the United States preventively. And by the way, both countries had the right to take action reactively, because remember that Iran has killed many Americans, many Israelis. Iran in 1979 hijacked, kidnapped, took hostages of American diplomats in complete violation of all international law. And the country has the right to respond to that at a time and place of its choosing. Likewise, with Israel, Iran sent hundreds of rockets into Israel, and Israel had the right to respond. It didn't have to do it that day. It could do it as it did it last week. And so this war, both by Israel and by the United States, it's not even a war. It's just, taking military action, are completely valid under international law, under domestic law, and under all concepts of morality.
You talk about Israel's big false negative, its decision in 2011 to release more than 1,000 Palestinian prisoners in exchange for kidnapped soldier Gilad Shalit. Now, one of the freed Palestinians, of course, was Yahya Sinwar, the Hamas military leader of the October 7th massacre and kidnappings in Israel. Hindsight, I guess, is often better than foresight. So why do unfortunate decisions like that happen?
Well, they happen all the time because the world made a mistake probably 50 years ago at Munich. The world should have decided it will never negotiate with terrorists, never, under any circumstances. If a person's kidnapped, all right, that's the end of that person. Sorry, but we're not going to negotiate. We're not going to release 1,000 potential murderers in order to get back one prisoner. I think when you join the military, you understand that if you're captured, the government may not want to exchange thousands of prisoners for you. Every country has made that mistake. Anytime you negotiate with terrorists, you encourage terrorism, and it always comes back and bites you in the rear end.
Up next, more with Alan Dershowitz, protecting the home front, excessive national security responses and threats to U.S. liberties, protests, immigration, and more lawsuits than any previous president, the legal and moral challenges facing Donald Trump and the American people. More now, featuring Harvard Law Professor Emeritus Alan Dershowitz, author of the book, The Preventive State, the challenge of preventing serious harms while preserving essential liberties. You are concerned about today's preventative state, and you write that most of today's preventative actions are being undertaken without a firm basis in law, jurisprudence, or morality. Which recent decisions concern you the most? Any that best fit that description?
Well, I think what the rule that I've set out, the law that I've set out, is if you fail to prevent, you will generally overreact afterward. And that's what happened in 9/11. We failed to prevent 9/11, so we passed the Patriot Act and these other statutes that were an overreaction. We tortured, etc. After we failed to prevent Pearl Harbor, we put 110,000 Americans in camps. That was an overreaction. Did Israel overreact in Gaza? Reasonable people could agree or disagree, but they failed to prevent October 7th. So the rule of nature, the rule of law, is that if you fail in your preventive action, you will overreact afterward in order to try to make up for that. And that often creates two bads, two wrongs, rather than two rights. So it's, I think, mostly better to err on the side of preventing rather than to err on the side of allowing. In other words, sometimes false positives are to be preferred over false negatives.
Well, talking about overreaction, I want to ask you about this one. Palestinian activist Mahmoud Khalil was reunited with his family over the weekend after a judge ordered him freed on bail from an ICE detention facility in Louisiana. The Secretary of State Marco Rubio pulled his residency status and ordered him deported, arguing that Khalil's activities at Columbia University pose potentially serious adverse foreign policy consequences for the United States. And it seems that Rubio does have the authority under the Immigration and Nationality Act. Your thoughts, moral, legal, violation of Khalil's free speech rights? What is this all about?
Well, first of all, it really depends on what Khalil said when he sought his immigration status, his student visa, and his green card. Did he say he was coming here just to study and not to make trouble? Did he admit that he worked for various organizations that advocate violence? If he didn't, then he defrauded the country and he can have his immigration status revoked. I have no problem with granting him bail pending the resolution of this. What I have a problem with is how the left has lionized him and made him into a hero. Look, I defended the rights of Nazis to march in Skokie, but I wouldn't ever, ever praise the Nazis. And people on the left are praising this guy. This guy is a thug. This guy has advocated some of the worst things. He's an anti-Semite. He's anti-American. He's a bigot. Don't make him into a hero. Maybe the government overreacted by taking away his freedom without a due process. That's a fair point to make. But don't make him a hero. He's not a hero. He's a villain. That's the job of a civil liberties lawyer, to defend evil people, but not to make them into heroes. And so I think that's what's been terrible, that they've made this thug into a hero.
Well, and distorted the truth a little bit. We've seen many deportations of illegal immigrants over the years, 12 million under Clinton, 9 million under Bush, 4 million deported during the Obama presidency. How does Trump's approach today differ from previous administrations?
Well, I think Trump initially said he was going to try to prioritize the bad guys, the criminals, the rapists, the robbers, the et cetera. But then he overdid it, perhaps, and went after people with families, et cetera, people who worked on farms, people who worked in luxury hotels. And now he's pulled back a little and said, wait a minute, maybe we don't want to make it so difficult for farmers to get help and for hotel owners to get help. So I think we're seeing a work in progress. And ultimately, I hope we'll see a situation where the bad guys get deported first.
It's not just the issue of immigration, but there may be as many as 400 lawsuits already filed against President Trump's executive orders and other administrative actions since the start of his term 5 months ago. So that's about 2 to 3 cases every day. I don't think any president has experienced that. Why so many? What should be done about it? Anything? Is it overreach?
Yes, very much so. What we're seeing is lawfare, that we're using the law for political purposes. We're seeing it from all sides. But I think Trump has been the victim of it more than any other president in history. Many of these cases are frivolous, and I think Congress ought to pass a law saying if you want to have a national injunction that prevents the government from acting anywhere in the country, you have to go to a special court, which has the power to grant national injunctions. Right now, any district court judge selected by plaintiffs can issue a national injunction, and that creates real problems because you can have conflicting judges issuing conflicting national injunctions. So I think the reaction and the lawsuits being filed, there are too many. There are too many that are frivolous. That, if you have a substantial lawsuit and you think the Constitution has clearly been violated, okay, that's one thing. But I bet you there'll be lawsuits filed against the president for bombing Iran, and that will be frivolous, but it will happen. And so we have to see something being done about that. And the bar associations have not been taking an appropriate action. They've been one-sidedly against Trump.
Okay, the book is The Preventative State, The Challenge of Preventing Serious Harms While Preserving Essential Liberties. One of the great constitutional lawyers of our country and the world, Professor Alan Dershowitz. It's been a pleasure talking to you again. Thank you for sharing your insights. We appreciate
thank you. It's been a pleasure to be having such good, intelligent questions, and you are the best at that. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Professor. God bless you.
You too.
England and Wales are facing extinction. Now, Parliament has decided to accelerate the decline of British society by voting to approve a law that would allow any terminally ill adult to end their life with government assistance. Pancreatic cancer claimed the life of anti-legislation activist Pastor Philip Baitman just 2 days before the vote in British Parliament. Right up until the end, Baitman argued that the legislation was against God's plan for people.
It's not assisted dying, it's assisted suicide. It means a deliberate, willful act by a person to kill themselves. And so you are assisting somebody to kill themselves. Call it by that and see how many MPs vote for it.
Instead of calling it the Right to Commit Suicide Bill, it was given a more pleasant name, the Terminally Ill Adults Bill. Just days before the vote on this bill, MPs approved a more lenient abortion bill that allows a woman to undergo an abortion right up until the moment of giving birth. Folks, do you see what's happening in the UK? English and Welsh societies are already at risk of disappearing. Their fertility rate is 1.44 children per woman, the lowest on record, which means they're no longer birthing enough babies to replace the population. Now, these two bills are in their final stages. We must pray for a miracle that members of the House of Lords will come to their senses. The future of their nation is at stake. Let's remember what the prophet Joel told us in the Old Testament. Referring to God, he said in chapter 14, verse 5, "You have decided the length of our lives. You know how many months we will live, and we are not given a minute longer, and not a minute less." Our Creator is sovereign. It's up to Him, not governments, to decide when we live and when we die. Well, that's it today from the Global Lane. Until next time, be blessed.